Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 175th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it's our 629th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, June 25th, 2020. I'm your host, Brian Tonsoni. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
On Monday, IU released its initial COVID-19 testing data for the men's basketball, women's basketball, and football players who have returned to campus. In all, 187 tests were conducted across the three sports, and there were 0 positive tests. Obviously, it's important to not read too much into one initial round of testing, but the results can't get any better than that, so we'll take it, especially given the high number of positive tests that we've seen at other schools, Clemson and LSU most notably. Perhaps Indiana's perfect round of testing was just a matter of luck, and many positive tests are forthcoming, or perhaps Indiana really is doing a better job than other schools of implementing and following safety protocols that legitimately decrease the risk of spread among the athlete population. There's no way to tell at this point. All we can do as basketball fans is continue to track these numbers when they come out, hope that they stay as low as possible, and watch how other sports handle positive tests when they happen. We all agree that we want sports back as soon as possible while also balancing the health concerns for the participants and their communities. It's not going to be easy, and given the larger trends in the U.S., difficult situations and decisions surely lie ahead. But at least for these IU athletes, it's so far so good. We'll take what we can get at this point and move forward. Okay, let me introduce my esteemed co-host for the evening, and we will be joined by Jared later on in the show. But to my right, Ryan, what's your rant this week on IU hoops?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate some of our fellow Hoosiers who are big-time Liverpool fans. The long-suffering soccer franchise got its first Premier League title in 30 years. So I know Zach Osterman is a big Liverpool fan. I know our buddy Jason Kennedy was also a big Liverpool fan. So congratulations for that. It was a long time coming and quite a thrilling season, even if it had a big interruption there. But I think it's just the big thing for me is that workouts, they're back to workouts and doing some individual stuff and starting to really, get back on campus and get back into the flow of actually being basketball players again. And I'm sure a lot of them were working out at home and all that stuff, but getting back on campus, and you're seeing guys share pictures of finally getting to campus and all that stuff. I think Trace Jackson Davis posted it either yesterday or the day before that he was back in Bloomington, and it's nice to see that they can finally be back to sort of some level of normalcy. I mean, look, when you're in your early 20s and maybe even before turning 20, you want normalcy. You want something to sort of feel normal when you're going through college. And so getting back on campus, getting to work out, getting to see your teammates. I think even though they've been doing, Zoom calls and stuff like that, it's better to, be in person and build that chemistry that you need. And so I think that's the big storyline of the week for me, is that Indiana's basketball players back on campus ready to ramp up.
Yeah, it's always good to see. And the weight room pictures are coming out. And so it's starting to get back to what we want, albeit a little bit late and a little bit slowed down. Okay, here's what we're going to talk about this week. The Big Ten All-Decade Team was put out through the Big Ten Network. We'll talk about that. This week's main focus is Armaan Franklin, his player preview. And at the end, in segment 3, we'll answer your questions. All of that coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. But before we get to all of that, here's a few quick announcements. Please continue to support our friends at Homefield at homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code AssemblyCall20. They've just done a great job at supporting local businesses, their own personnel. So continue to go to Homefield and check out what they have. Also, a quick note, I hope I pronounced this correct, Ben Steinar on Twitter. Steiner. Thank you. Per source, former Indiana University standout Devontae Green has received NBA interest from the Minnesota Timberwolves. Utah Jazz and the Milwaukee Bucks for the upcoming 2020 NBA Draft. Green recently signed with Rock Nation Sports Agency. We wish Devontae a lot of luck in his pursuit of basketball.
Just to interrupt there, Ben Steiner is doing some work for the Big Lead. So a little cross promotion. Go to the Big Lead and check out Ben Steiner, who's an IU guy doing some work for NBA
and always
work.
hit those links. We learned that last week to help
everyone. Got to do it. Hit those links, guys.
Got to hit the links. So recently, the Big Ten All-Decade team came out, and the first team was Trey Burke, Draymond Green, Frank Kaminsky, Evan Turner, and Denzel Valentine, despite Evan Turner playing only one season in the decade. The second team was Carson Edwards, Ethan Happ, Victor Oladipo, Jared Sullinger, and Cassius Winston. And the third team was Aaron Kraft, Yogi Ferrell, Jawan Johnson, Jordan Murphy, D'Angelo Russell, and Caleb Swanigan. And Russell played one season for Ohio State, and that team was a sixth-place team. The coach
he got
of the
votes.
decade,
He clearly
Tom
got
Izzo.
Yeah, he clearly got D'Angelo Russell was a ridiculous selection, but he got votes because of what he's done in the NBA, and he's turned out to be a max player in the NBA. So that I found that ridiculous.
And did you see by any chance what the criteria was? Was it overall career impact on winning, what they've done afterwards? Because I think it should be what they did during the decade for their teams, and specifically winning teams. There's a lot of good players, but not every good player helps their team win. There's some obvious players that I think were left off the roster. Let me throw out a few to you, Ryan, and see if you agree. The number one person hits home is Cody Zeller, not on three teams of the All-Decade team, averaged double figures, and not just over 10 points a game. Totally came in and changed the program around, 2 Sweet 16s. And is not on the first, second, or third team, All-Decade team. Your thoughts?
I get that not everybody can be on it because you have a limited number of space, and you're considering Cody Zeller just a center. Then Caleb Swanigan, Jared Sullinger, Ethan Happ, Frank Kaminsky, you consider those guys, and they probably had deeper tournament runs. Maybe they were considered for all Big Ten Player of the Year. And here's the thing. Cody Zeller, had Victor Oladipo not been around, he probably would have gotten more individual accolades, but those two guys split a lot of accolades. So I get it. I think it's wrong. I get what they're looking at, and they're also trying to spread it around to some different teams as well. The big thing for me was Victor Oladipo was one of the most impactful players in the Big Ten in the last decade. And the fact that he's on the second team and not the first team drove me nuts. And if you're sticking to, there has to be a point guard, a shooting guard, that's ridiculous. Trey Burke won Big Ten Player of the Year that year. Victor Oladipo was the better player, and Victor Oladipo dominated him in 2 matchups. So the fact that Trey Burke is on the first team, not Victor Oladipo, irked me. I get that you look at the accolades and Burke gets the nod, but to have Evan Turner on, who, again, played one season in that decade over Oladipo, or, I think you got to go with 3 perimeter players and 2 post-like players. I think that's the way you do it instead of setting up positions. And if you do it that way, there's no way that Victor Oladipo isn't one of the 3 best wing, guard, whatever players of the last decade. So that drove me nuts. I think, Draymond Green was a good player in college. I think he's been better in the NBA than he was as far as making an impact on, the level of impact he's had. So I don't know if he's a first teamer from his college days. He was a first team All-American, but how many years was he? He was third team, or he was, on the all Big Ten teams for a couple years. I guess you give that, but it's hard to make huge arguments for all of these guys to be on the first team over an Oladipo, who his junior year, his final year, he was likely the best player in the country at that time.
I think there are 3 players on the second team that really have an argument to move up to the top level, and that's Cassius Winston, who just was dominant for his 4 years at the point.
For sure. I think Cassius Winston could jump Trey Burke easily.
And maybe even Denzel Valentine. I know Denzel was good, but I think Cassius really ran that team. And I have to say, sadly, I think Carson Edwards, for his impact on the Purdue team and the run that they made to go to the Elite Eight and his tournament play, can be considered for moving up into that that first team as well. And it's just interesting because how do you compare Evan Turner played 2 seasons, and then his junior season was 2009-2010, which fit into the decade. He only had 1, so it's kind of hard to compare. You know, you take his total 3 years versus that. Does he count? But I don't think Evan Turner and then later D'Angelo Russell, the 1 year, and didn't impact winning a Big Ten title or anything like that. Those are the 2 questionable ones. I'm not saying Evan Turner shouldn't be on the roster here in the first, second, or third team, but I don't know that he is first team material, as you said. Let's get to some snubs.
Let me just say something real quick. And I'm not saying that the guys who were on the first team aren't deserving of consideration for the first team. Like Draymond Green was a phenomenal player in college. I'm just talking about Draymond versus, you know, the second team guys. Like, where's the line that you're making? And I don't think they made it very clear how they made their suggestions. Like, if it's about postseason accolades, Draymond Green's on the first team. There's no question. And Trey Burke, you know, was Big Ten Player of the Year. Does he get that consideration? If you're looking at how impactful they were on the court, you know, all these other things, I don't know. It's hard for me to decide like how they actually came up with this. And of course, as an Indiana fan, you see only 2 players on it, and one of them isn't Cody Zeller. You're kind of shocked by it. So I don't know. The guys on the first team were all good players and made an impact in the Big Ten. It is weird. I think the Evan Turner selection is a little odd, considering he only played 1 season.
It's also weird, and I know this is the Indiana show, but Wisconsin had a lot of success in the decade, and they spread out, you know, their stats. You know, there were a couple players from Wisconsin, and I'm not saying first team necessarily, but I had a list of subs, and I went back and looked at individual stats over their career. But Sam Decker played in this decade. Nigel Hayes, Bronson Koenig, those guys were really solid too. You could make an argument that they might make a third team, but the big one, and as time passes, you forget, is the point guard Jordan Taylor. If you really go back and compare his stats for his 4 years, and they ended in 2012, 2013, his stats compared to Aaron Craft, and I'm not saying Aaron Craft doesn't deserve to be up there, but the stats, you know, don't match up compared to Jordan Taylor, who was the point guard at Wisconsin at the time. But Zeller, to me, is the obvious number 1 snub, but I had Jordan Taylor, Sam Decker, Robbie Hummel. I can maybe understand because injuries derailed his last couple years a little bit, but I thought he was a real impactful player in the decade. Nick Stauskas from Michigan, but he was only around for 2 years. Gary Harris had a solid 2 years in the decade. I would have considered Jared Utoff at Iowa, Etwan Moore, Purdue, Miles Bridges, Michigan State. I had Nigel Hayes and Koenig, and then Deshaun Thomas from Ohio State had solid run in his years at Ohio State. So whenever you put together a squad like this, there's always going to be points of contention, regardless of how you select. But any thoughts on any of those snubs that should be moved in, or you would have moved in personally?
I don't know. I mean, I think Zeller should be on because, you know, I'm an Indiana homer. Come on. That's really the only one I had a big problem with. Some of those other guys, yeah. I mean, certainly, again, if you limit it to 15 players, there's going to be 30 that think that people think have a shot on it. So it's kind of a futile exercise a little bit. I mean, look, the third team is pretty loaded. You got Aaron Craft, Yogi Ferrell, Jawan Johnson, Jordan Murphy, D'Angelo Russell, and Caleb Swanigan. I think Russell probably you take out. You know, he got it again because he was the number 2 pick in the draft, and he's wound up being a decent NBA player who just got a max contract. Like, I mean, that's why he's on, and he had a good freshman year. But are we talking about how good they could have been if they stayed 4 years, or are we talking about how good they actually were in the Big Ten? He was a really good player, but.
And to some extent, you can't penalize him for a selection like this because he was good enough to go to the pros as the number 2 draft. So that would be the argument for keeping a player like that. You know?
Yeah. So,
but I do think for me, it's Zeller and Jordan Taylor. As I looked over the list, those are the 2 that I thought were the most deserving. The others were just really quality players that I had listed. But
here's the thing. Here's what I would say about D'Angelo Russell. Again, he played 1 season for a 6th place team. We're not arguing for Romeo Langford to be on the list,
right?
You know, and again, Romeo didn't have as good a freshman season as D'Angelo Russell did, but you wouldn't even try and make the argument that he was up there, and he was a lottery pick.
Noah Vonleh.
Yeah, I mean, you're not making that argument because clearly they weren't around long enough to make a big impact. So I do think the Russell pick on there is a recency bias thing, is seeing how well he's turned out in the NBA. And he had a great one season, but it didn't really impact much.
I think it is kind of hard when you see players move on to the league, and the league is so talented that you see where they played college ball, when they played college ball, to have that sit in your mind. And it is such a personal decision-making. For me, it's what impact did you have for your longevity, and did you impact winning? To me, that's what makes a college player. And sometimes, like a guy like Cassius Winston, who is going to be a great college basketball player, may not have a great pro career. He might just be at best a role player or whatever because of his skill set, but that doesn't take away from him being one of the best players that has played against Indiana.
And look, if it's about impacting, winning, Draymond Green makes sense as a first team pick. I mean, it really does, because he did everything for that Michigan State team, and that's why he was the Big Ten Player of the Year. But he, I think it was 2012, he was Big Ten Player of the Year. But he, if it's about individual skill, and that's why D'Angelo Russell's on, so it really seems the criteria is kind of mixed here. So that was what I took away.
Yep, but for our sake, we're putting Zeller on and dropping D'Angelo Russell just because we're homers, and we can do that on this show. So, okay, coming up, we look ahead to Armaan Franklin's sophomore season. Showed flashes of being the kind of 3-and-D win and has lacked in recent season. Can he become reliable in that role as a sophomore? We'll discuss next. Stick with us.
What's up, y'all? It's Devontae Green giving you the green light to watch Assembly Call after every IU game. Just don't listen to their opinions about shot selection. Remember, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back to the Assembly Call. Thanks, Devontae. This segment, we are going to be talking about who's going to get your minutes and your shots. So you might want to tune in and see what we decide. But you can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcast or watch those replays and see all the in-between segment banner, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm not Andy Bottoms. I almost read that word for word. I'm Brian Tonsoni with Ryan Phillips.
You almost pulled a Ron Burgundy. Just read whatever's in the prompter.
I didn't erase any of this stuff. So I'm Brian Tonsoni, for those of you listening, and I'm here with Ryan Phillips. We're going to be talking Armaan Franklin and his player preview for the upcoming season. Armaan played 34.4% of the minutes overall, but he saw those minutes drastically decrease from February 1st until the game against Nebraska in the Big Ten tournament, where he averaged just 5.8 minutes. He shot 26.6% from three. That's not counting 7 for 10 at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. Was just 18.6% otherwise. He does have a history of shooting well in high school, 39 and 35%. So Ryan, Armaan Franklin, as you see what he did last year and some of the things that you see will be his strengths moving forward next season.
Well, it starts with defense with Armaan. I think he's a very aggressive on-ball defender, and I think that's really what Archie Miller likes about him, is he's aggressive. Now, look, one of the things he did, and we talked about it a lot this season, and this is a freshman trait, so it's not, a knock on Armaan. He guarded a lot with his hands this year. As soon as he would, his man would dribble, he'd stick his hands out, almost like touch the guy on his hip or something like that. That's a natural reaction that you just have to break, because in high school, they're not going to call that. In college, if you're facing a good point guard, they will call that every single time. As soon as your hands go out, they'll call it every single time. And so he got called for a lot of fouls on that. But he moves his feet well. He's aggressive. He gets in passing lanes. And he's not afraid. You see this kid, and he is not afraid to challenge offensive players with his defense. I think the key with him is going to be his shooting. Can he bring his shooting around? And we saw that he can shoot it. As you said, he went 7 of 10 at Bankers Life in big moments. So he can shoot. I think there's a little bit of an over-rotation on his shot that, again, he's got to work on. He's got to get stronger so he's not forcing his body to sort of twist as he shoots. So you work on that upper body, get stronger. You don't have to use your arm as much when you shoot. You can be more wrist focused because your arm is already strong enough. You don't need to, slam your body around to get the shot off. So we saw inconsistencies in his shooting. You did see him be aggressive on drives sometimes, and it would kind of be out of nowhere, like, oh, hey, Armaan, nice drive. But I think that he's a guy who needs to work on that jump shot. If he can get that jump shot down, he can be a big time contributor as opposed to just a role player for this team over the next couple of years. I think he's going to be a 4-year player. I think he's got the ability to do some things, and he's smart, he's heady, and he's aggressive. And those are 3 things Archie Miller loves. And so you can tell why he likes Armaan Franklin. And sometimes last year, as Rob Finney worked his way back, you'd see him not being aggressive. And then you put Armaan Franklin on the floor and see whether or not he can succeed at it or not. You see his attitude is more aggressive, more go forward, more, find a way to do something fast. Now, again, the skill level isn't up to where it needs to be for him to do that consistently, but you see that mindset of a more aggressive player. Rob Finney has the skill, needs to change the mindset. Armaan Franklin has the mindset, needs to change the skill level. So they are actually sort of a mismatched pair that if you combine the best qualities of both, you might get a pretty darn good player. I think Armaan will get there over time. I'm not sure about whether it's going to be this season. He's going to be a fully realized player, but I think he is definitely a candidate for a breakout if his offense comes around, certainly.
You brought up several points that I'd like to talk about as well. I thought he was thrown into the fire early last season because of the injuries to Green and Finney, and had to play lots of minutes, maybe even before he was ready. And I thought he handled that pressure rather well. As a young person, you're going to have turnovers. You're going to have maybe some bad shot selection, some missed shots, some of those things when you play that first 10, 15 games. But he had 2 really good scoring games against good quality opponents. He single-handedly kept us in and won the Notre Dame game, which was a big thing.
Sure.
He wasn't afraid of the moment, which shows you that moment can be there in the next season, and it can be there more than just a couple of games, at Banker's Life.
Yeah, just to clarify, he had 17 points in that game and made 4 or 5 threes and was just nails. They were all
and the clutch shot
too.
at the end to put Indiana ahead.
Yeah,
that's some intangibles of a player. That I think can, result in increased minutes, increased production. The question is just going to be how much. How quick does that development get to be at the Big Ten level? But the other game, I'm trying to think, he scored 9 points. I had it somewhere, but in getting ready, I forgot. His other big game was against Florida State. And I know Devontae played well in that game too, but those are 2 big games on the road against Notre Dame and Florida State that would have helped Indiana get to the tournament, as we knew they were at the end. And he was ready in December to do those things. And I think that he just ran into a little bit of a freshman wall, and then the rotation was, we're going to go as far as we can with Devontae and Al and some of those guys. And that's where he was just victim of tightening up the rotation. But he was also ready, Ryan, after not playing lots of minutes the last 8 games of the Big Ten, 25 minutes against Nebraska, he went in and played hard, and it wasn't hero ball or anything. I got my chance, and I thought he played really well given the lack of time that he had. Those things, those intangibles, I think are really good. I want to ask you a little bit about his shot. You talked about it. I think his shot selection hurt his percentage. I thought maybe he shot too early in possessions. I thought he shot too deep. He wasn't around the 3-point line. And I thought that he hurried his shot to try to, you get as a freshman, you want to prove that you can shoot and prove that you can make instead of understanding when to shoot the basketball. Do you think that his understanding of college speed and the college game and what Archie expects will automatically increase that 26% 3-point shooting?
Yeah, like most young players who aren't superstars, he was thinking too much. And I think that you had some hesitation shots, and also, as you said, you had some rush shots, and you had some where he caught it and the hesitation was where he caught it and just was like, should I shoot this? Okay. And he's wide open because he's a freshman who hasn't hit a great percentage. So he's backed off. I think that a lot of it's just going to be focus for him. and it's going to be feeling natural on the floor. The free throw percentage, not great. I mean, it was 61% for him from the free throw line. If I'm not correct and not looking, 61.5. It has to be a natural motion for you. He has to get used to that and not think about it and just make it so it's a natural motion. And it's focus. It's also concentration. And the 3-point line is the same way. You can't be thinking when you step to the 3-point line. You either instinctively know this is a shot that I need to take, or I need to move the ball down the line, or I need to drive, or whatever. It's an instinct. If you're thinking too much, your brain gets in the way of your body. And so I think it's a focus thing also with that. It's be focused and locked into the game, not thinking, okay, the ball's coming to me. What am I going to do here? Okay, what do I do? Okay, I'll shoot it. It needs to be instinctive. You need to know where your teammates are on the floor. That all comes with age and, development and all that stuff. So I think that he'll get better. But I think also it's something he's going to have to work on is making sure his game gets caught up. I think his shot, again, rushed sometimes, took too much time on other times. I mean, it was the Goldilocks thing. He was never quite locked in perfectly. If you watch the games of Banker's life, he shot it confidently. You would watch that and think, oh man, this guy's a knockdown shooter. You watch the rest of the season and you see a completely different player. And I tell you what he did at Bankers and you would be like, that's not the same. There's no way he did that. It's two different players. He hit the sweet spot when he was at home in Indianapolis. Got to bring that to Bloomington now, and so I think there's just a development curve that needs to happen. Again, you get a 5-star guy who's super confident in his ability, no matter where he plays, he's going to be fine. Armaan was a guy who's got to prove himself. I mean, he was a good recruit, but he's not at that superstar level. And when you're not at that superstar level, it takes time to develop. So none of this is unexpected. I think entering last season, we all kind of expected the season we got from Armaan. We thought aggressive defense, maybe some aggressive rim attacking, maybe not a great shooting situation. I mean, I know he shot pretty well in high school, but it was still a developing shot. So I think we got what we expected from Armaan. Now, maybe not, in the way we expected. He played a lot early, took a big break, and then, started to show in that last game of the season. So I think that this year it's really got to be a development year for him. I think the potential for him is very high to be a very, very good Big Ten player if he develops.
Another thing that you said that I agree with is that he seemed to be able to push the ball at an appropriate pace. You don't want to play too fast, and sometimes freshmen play too fast in their decision-making and their technique. But a few weeks back, I did a breakout for our community on the pace. And I thought his pace, the 2 or 3 times he got the ball and pushed, he had his head up, and he's that kind of guy. But I also think he's going to be able to. He did it in high school, Yeah, he's going to benefit from being off the ball. There was so much turmoil at the guard position with 2 injuries and not too many guards last year that I think he was forced to have the ball in his hands to get things started where he can do that. But with Lander and Finney, he doesn't have to do that. That frees him up to get his feet set for 3-point shots. My question to you is, I think Indiana needs a drive game. Not just a 3 and not just a post game, but they need a downhill game. And I think Armaan might be able to do that. And I just wondering your thoughts on his ability to beat people off the bounce and score at the rim, either in transition or in the half court. Can he develop into that in time?
Athletically, yes, he can. And I think honestly playing with Christian Lander, and again, a lot of people get stuck on the primary ball handler and all that stuff. I think Indiana is going to be a situation where they're going to have multiple guys who can bring the ball up. Obviously, Christian Lander is going to be number 1 on that list, or Rob Finney will probably be number 1 to start the season, but I think they'll be co-number 1s essentially. Armaan Franklin and Al Durham then don't have to bring the ball up as much, and that's a positive for Indiana because I'm not saying those guys aren't good at it. They can do it, but you'd rather have guys who are really good at it doing it and letting those other guys run off the ball. So I think that, yes, on the break, I would rather see Armaan Franklin breaking in from the wing than at the point with the ball. And I think that that's going to be a role he can fill. And again, athletically, he's there. Aggressiveness-wise, he's there. He's got to get in a mental place where he's aggressive every time. Because, again, when we saw him attack the rim aggressively, or we saw him get inside and shoot the ball confidently and aggressively, he was successful. It's just a matter of getting it inside his head that, okay, I belong here. I can do this. And I think he can do it. I think that he's got an aggressive mindset. It's a matter of tuning that in every time and making sure he has that aggressive mindset, not just on defense, but also on offense when he gets a ball in his hands.
There were a few times where I thought he drove into people and into traffic too, and that's just part of understanding the game. And what's nice and gives me some
you have to pick your spots with it.
Yeah, is we got some guys that have some ability coming back that now have a year of experience, and they have it on tape, and they're learning what they did right, and they're learning what they did wrong. But I do like the aggressive nature of Armaan, and the question for this segment is, can he be a breakout player? The question is, yes, he can. It's just going to be whether it's going to be in his sophomore year or is it going to be in his junior year. We would all like to see it a little bit earlier than not. Let's switch over a little bit to defense. I thought he was okay defensively, position-wise, and on the ball. You've mentioned a lot last year. He was real handsy. He got his head over his stance a little bit too much, and didn't drop his feet as fast and would grab on ball.
He played defense like a freshman. I mean, let's be real.
But again, I've been talking to people on social media and texts and that, and what keeps coming up is hard-nosed. And I think defensively he brings a level of toughness, and I overuse that word, but the hard-nosed play that he'll go in and try to guard someone, he'll try to go in and rebound, and he'll try to do the right things, and with experience, the mistakes will be limited. Can he be one of the better defenders on the team, or has he just got to play defense at a certain level? Can he be a good defender for this basketball team?
Yeah, I think he can. I think he could be the second best defender on the team at the guard position next year, as soon as next year. And I think he was up there this past year. I don't know where the dividing line was, because again, as a freshman, he made mistakes. He was out of position a little bit, but his on-ball aggressiveness and want to defensively is right there with anybody. Rob Finney, I think, is the best defender on this team. I think Armaan Franklin has a chance to surpass him if he gets the fundamentals down. The fundamentals being, don't grab guys when they drive. Don't, over rotate and then under rotate back or whatever. If he gets those little things down that, again, come from growing as a college basketball player naturally and fitting in the system and knowing the guys around you, knowing how far you can sag off of an opposing guard and still get help from somebody else. And, all those little things. If he does that, I think he could be the best defensive guard on the team. I really do. Will that happen this year? I don't know. It depends on how much they developed. And the other thing is that we talk about development a lot, and development of, as you said, toughness, shooting, all of those things develop year to year for guys. And we talk about what normal development is. We don't know what normal development is going to look like this year. It's very different. And so there's all these caveats with like what guys will be this year. And we've talked about it pretty much every time we've done one of these player breakdowns. We said, well, they should go this way, but we'll see, and so, but I think Armaan's a guy who's going to work hard. Everything I've heard about him is that he's a guy who really wants this. He's dedicated, and he's going to work hard. If he does that, he's going to be a very good Big Ten player.
One of the things I like guards to do is go rebound, and I think he has a nose for the ball. In thinking back over the games from last year, he was quick to dive on the floor. He was quick to mix it up. He was not afraid as a freshman, and most freshmen aren't, because they played a lot of AAU, but there's just, at that level, he was not. The moment didn't catch him.
He's not
off
afraid
guard.
at all.
Yeah, he didn't catch him off guard.
His first college game, he had 5 points. He had 5 rebounds and 8 assists. His first college game. I know they weren't playing for a good team, but it was, who was that? Western Illinois, I think, the Leathernecks. Yeah. 5 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists in his first college game. You're thinking, who is this kid? I mean, he came back down to earth, but he had 8 rebounds against Nebraska in the Big Ten tournament. I mean, this is a guy who's aggressive and goes and chases the game. And so that's a positive, because you need that kind of a personality on your roster anyway. So anywhere you can get it, it's great.
So to round up Armaan Franklin's player preview, what kind of minutes, and this is always a question everyone likes to hear, and it's bandied around, what kind of minutes, and do you think that he can play some 3 if Indiana wants to go to 3 guards or needs someone? Can he guard that? I think he could play that position offensively. My question would be, can he guard that of 6'6", 6'7", kind of 3? Can he play that if Indiana wanted to go small ball, in your opinion? So, what kind of role do you see him playing? And is he just the 2, or can he play some 3 in your opinion?
Well, let's remember Devontae Green is leaving, so that's 22 minutes up for grabs. Obviously, Lander's going to get some of those. Justin Smith's also gone on the wing, so I think that they're going to do a lot of 3-guard lineups, and so that opens spots for both Lander and Armaan Franklin and other guys to sort of stake a claim there. They really have some room there. I mean, Justin Smith played 30.4 minutes a game. If they're going to mix in guys like Jerome Hunter, of course, and other guys, that's going to obviously take some of that opportunity, but I think the guards have a chance to play it. And you know why the Indians are going to have a lot of 3-guard lineups? Because other teams are going to have 3-guard lineups. So whether or not he can guard the 3 might be irrelevant. But he's 6'4". He's got some length. I mean, I think he could guard a 6'6" guy on the wing, certainly. I don't think there's any issue with that. You might get posted up, but you've got Trace Jackson-Davis behind you ready to block a shot if you know a bigger guy posts you up. So I really don't think that's going to be a huge issue for him. If he can guard guys off the dribble, which I think he can, again, getting rid of the handsiness, getting rid of the maybe being a little over aggressive. If he can guard guys off the dribble, it doesn't matter what size they are. I really don't think that, because when guys back him down with the big guys that IU has, he's going to have help there. So yes, I think he can guard on the wing. It may not be his ideal scenario, but I think that he can guard on the wing and really help Indiana that way. So maybe he can play some of that, other wing position, but we'll see. Here's the thing. This is a situation where all of the guys on IU's roster have to step up. They have to get better because Lander's coming in, Leal's coming in, Galloway's coming in, off the wing, Geronimo's coming in. These guys are going to fight for minutes. They didn't come to Indiana to sit on the bench. Now, I think that this group, other than Lander, really has a chance to be freshmen and play 5-10 minutes, little spurts, get their feet wet, and then develop for the next season. I really think they're the first group under Archie Miller who has a chance to do that and really doesn't have to come in and replace big minutes and big points. But at the same time, those guys don't want to do that. Those guys want to play. And so if Armaan Franklin wants to keep his minutes and increase his minutes, he's going to have to fight for them. And that fighting and that competition makes guys better.
Yeah, and I went back through the opponent's size when I was thinking about minutes played, and there were like 4 or 5 teams that had 6'8", 6'9", traditional small forward types, but they were even a little more thinner 3-point shooters, slashers than they were post-up type guys. So I don't see that being a problem. I don't know that that's where he'll get his major minutes at the 3, but he can fill in there depending on the rotation. So I think Armaan Franklin's going to get anywhere from 16 to 20 minutes a game, depending on matchups and his progression from a freshman to a sophomore. I think he's going to be a big part of the success of this team, and I'm looking forward to seeing his type of play out on the floor for our Indiana Hoosiers. So coming up on our third segment, we'll answer your questions, including one about how Trey and Anthony might fit together, and another one about Indiana's best potential offensive lineup. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call.
This is Jordan Halls, and I never miss a shot or an episode of the Assembly Call.
Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Brian Tonsoni with Ryan Phillips. Remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup even during the offseason, and after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866. Or go to assemblycall.com. It's now time for our mailbag. All questions were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community at assemblycall.com/community. We're going to start off the first question. Hoosier Daddy asked, how does Leal and Galloway project in the future playing with each other? They are both listed as shooting guards, but I know Trey is more versatile.
Trey is more versatile. He can play off the wing. He could bring the ball up if you need him to. Leal is more of a classic shooting guard. They're both high effort guys. They're both tough kids, and they're both multi-skilled. I mean, Leal is more of a shooter, defender, hustle guy. And Galloway is just sort of an all around guy who needs to develop his shot a little bit, but he's aggressive. He's smart. They're both very smart, actually, basketball players. So I think that they match up on a court really well together because they're two of the same type of kids who are going to go all out and do whatever it takes to win. They don't care about numbers. They don't care about any of that stuff. And that's what you want in Indiana. That's what Indiana basketball is built on. And both kids, the thing about both kids, they both know what they're getting into by going to Indiana. They know this program and they know the history of Indiana as well. So I think they match up really well as teammates. They've played together forever. Also, if you watch a lot of their team's AAU footage, they just know where each other are on the floor. I mean, they didn't go to high school together, but they played together a lot and they know each other well. They're buddies, all of that stuff. It's great chemistry. And I think that they're going to, however they fit, however they develop, those two guys will be a pair that we will look at for years in Indiana.
Yeah, I agree. Them playing together in AAU, along with the season with Lander, is really going to pay dividends down the road. And I think they are both shooting guards, but they do those different things. Like, they're just both, really good, tough team kids. Next question is from Marchie Priller. Love the name. So follow him on Twitter. What do you think would be the best offensive lineup? Lander, Robb, Durham, Race, and TJD would be his. I think that would be pretty good defensive lineup as well. L's a little slow laterally, but Race rotates over well. Jerome and Brunk first off the bench, scoring and leadership. Your thoughts on the best offensive lineup, Bryant?
I think that's a pretty good one. Lander, Finney, Durham, Race Thompson, and Trace Jackson Davis. I think that's a good offensive lineup. I think getting Hunter maybe some time going small and putting Hunter at that 4 slot, if he's developing the way everybody is talking about the way he's developed this offseason, might even be better if you want to go up tempo and a little smaller. He's got some size to him. You don't see it as much because he plays more on the wing, but he's got some size to him, could probably fill in at that 4 spot. But yeah, that's a lineup that's going to run and it's going to go small and it's going to get up the court. And so I like that lineup. You could even replace, Al with Hunter on the wing and put Race down at the 4 as well. So, but I agree. I think that's the one that you look at and you think, oh, here's the Ferrari. Like this can go. You may not have the best defense on the floor. That's a decent defensive lineup, I think, but that's a fun lineup. What do you think, Coach?
Yeah, I would say for best offense, Jerome needs to be out there for his potential. He hasn't shown it yet.
We'll see what he is.
He's got to come back and bring it. But the potential for a post-up game against smaller guys or bring a bigger guy out to shoot the threes, if he could add a little bounce to it, I think he's got a little more offense if you're going to play him at the 4 than Race.
If you slide him to the 4 for sure.
Durham, Hunter and TJD, that's going to be a really good offense. And I wouldn't mind seeing, the 2 guards and Hunter playing the 3. I do think Race, we talked in his player preview that he needs to be given the green light to shoot. His form's pretty good.
He can spread the floor. And by the way, if those 4 can spread the floor, it leaves Trace Jackson Davis on the inside to work alone on one-on-one. And if they could spread the floor. Yeah,
I think those are that's a good lineup. I really think that it's not going to be a struggle to find lineups that we like, even with bringing guys off the bench, and you could bring in a Leal if you need shooting for 5 to 6 minutes here or there. You could bring Geronimo for athleticism if you're out and running. That's very deep in the lineup too. And we've just talked about Armaan Franklin coming in and being able to do some things. So there's a lot of twisting and turning that Archie can do with the lineup. But Marchie, I like that lineup. I just would try to fit Jerome in there personally for me somehow with his offensive potential. All right, so Ryan, we're going to come down here. Jeff asked Ryan how he feels about municipalities building stadiums for professional sports teams. Does it give you, I'm not sure the end of the question, but do you have tears of joy or just tears, I guess, when you hear about municipalities building stadiums?
Well, this is coming up because obviously I'm a San Diego resident who tweeted today about an interesting article about what would have happened to San Diego if they had approved a tax increase to keep the Chargers in San Diego, and the city would essentially be broke because it was supposed to be based on a hotel tax, and nobody's going to hotels, and so the city would have had to make that up. I mean, projections are the city would have gone about $2 billion in debt because of coronavirus shutting everything down. So look, I think that I've said this for a long time before the Chargers even had their issues in San Diego. If you're a billionaire owner of a sports franchise, you should be paying for your stadium. The city should not have to foot the bill. I think that's, if you have enough money to own, if you don't have enough money to own a sports franchise and figure out a way to finance a stadium, you should not own that sports franchise. These should be privately owned facilities that the city is not on the hook for. Because if you look at throughout history, every time a city builds a stadium, it almost never makes that money back through whatever, ways you want to say. I'm not saying it's not good for the city, but as far as financially, it usually ends up being a pretty bad deal for the city. So no, I do not think that municipalities should fund football stadiums. I think we are almost certainly at a point in this country where that's not going to happen again. Maybe it will in isolated cases, but if you're a billionaire sports owner, you should not be able to convince a city to foot the bill for your stadium. That is a ridiculous proposition, and those owners need to either find more money to build that stadium, sell pieces of the team to raise the money to build that stadium, or sell the team because you can't afford your stadium. So that's my soapbox for the day. If you're a billionaire sports owner, figure out a way to pay for your own stadium.
And we have a little time. We'll go to this. Bob Thompson, who produces most of our music, had a question, and we really need some more time to think about it. But we got about 2 minutes. Ryan, he said the latest Hoosier Hysterics pod had DJ White, an amazing and emotive player. Who is your all-time starting five of emotive players, sticking with the 1 through 5 positions? So we don't have to go 1 through 5, but are there certain players that you really appreciated at Indiana that had showed great emotions and that on the court?
I think that Victor Oladipo is the one that stands out to me at number one. I mean, that was a guy who pumped up the crowd every time he was on the floor. I think Yogi started to do that his senior year. I think he was a little bit more reserved when he started, but I think Yogi became a very emotive player as he moved through. We see Will Sheehy was a guy who wore his emotions on his sleeve as well. Whether that was good or bad sometimes, we had arguments about. But I think that Victor Oladipo is the one who stands out to me. Another one would be Thomas Bryant. He was another great emotive player who was also very skilled and exceptionally good. And I've been very happy to see Thomas, succeed in the NBA. But he was very passionate. He was one of those guys who the last guy off the bench could be in, and he would still be standing, waving a towel and pumping guys up. And he wasn't quiet on the bench. He wasn't even in the game, and he was being emotive. So I loved seeing that about Thomas. Who are some that you remember?
As long as they don't pop their collar. And I know Bob put that into my intro. But basically, if you show emotion because you've been successful and it's helping the team, I have no problem. Will Sheehy, Victor Oladipo, those guys, I think that's good emotion, and I think you need to play with that. But if it's the look at me, I'm pretty, I made a pretty move for myself, and I don't know, that might be hard to distinguish the difference between those two, but I thought those same two, but Sheehy to me, for his move at Purdue is probably my favorite emotive player, flexing at Purdue, because that's what needs to happen.
That's it. We're done. No more questions.
Okay, so we got all our questions in. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music you hear on the show. Apologies for not having all the drops ready for this emergency host, but thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next Thursday night. Until then, keep your elbows in and eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, that'll do it. Couldn't find the ending drop music there at the very end, and didn't want to go through that. But emotion is a thing. I've really believed that every one of your best artists has great emotions. Yeah. Your athletes really show it in different ways, but your musicians, your artists, you have to have that emotion. But as long as that emotion is pure and for the good of the team, because I think if you lack emotion, you never bring out the best of your athletic ability. So I'm a big fist bump guy. We watch film, Ryan, in our high school, and when we see good bench energy, everyone standing up and throwing a fist in the air. What's really great is almost once a game, there'll be a big play and you'll see everyone in unison, and we'll stop and take a screenshot of that and show our guys that everyone, one guy scores and three other guys are that's when you have a team. When everyone's showing that emotion for everything, and it's not that, pop the collar kind of stuff. But I like to see that. I think that's really good.
No, I think it's incredibly important. And Thomas Bryant's constant energy had a lot to do with that team gelling and being, more effective. And some guys need that energy, as you said, to get the best of themselves.
Right.
You
and you can have too much.
Up. Yeah,
you could get
of course you
out
can, because you can make and by the way, Thomas did that sometimes. Yep. I remember one time he got a ball stolen from him, and then he tried to take a point guard 1-on-1, got the ball stolen from him again. It's because he was just like, I got to get that back. And so I think that you just have to. It's a measured thing, and it has to be smart, and it has to be channeled the right way. And sometimes it's hard for young players, especially, to know how to do that. But energy is huge. I mean, a team with no energy, it's dead in the water. You need a hype man. You need somebody out there to pump you up.
And sometimes guys who don't need that get looked down upon. I mean, Romeo had a little bit of that negativity, which is unfair, because he just was that guy that went about his business. OG was another guy that didn't show a whole lot of emotion on the floor. And it's each to their own. And that goes to coaching too. You got to figure out your guys sometimes who do you get on if they're acting too much of an idiot, and other guys who might need to boost it a little bit. But those are two that are on the other end that are really good players that didn't really show a lot of emotion.
Yeah, and a guy like Al Durham started to show some last year. Yes. More and more and more. He'd make a great finish and celebrate. He hit a big three. He had some really, really big moments, and he showed emotion and focus and all of that stuff. Focused emotion is what I meant to say.
I was in breaking down film for the Coach's Corner. There was a play against Michigan State where Race Thompson there were three Michigan State guys, and Race battled for a rebound and kind of stole it, and everyone had run back, and Joey Brunk was the first guy back, and he gets the pass, and he scores in traffic, and he's running back, and he's got his little arm up, fist pump. And I'm like, okay, Joey, Race got that one for you, bud.
Yeah. And Race had that moment, and it wasn't a big explosion of emotion, but he had that moment where I think it was against Ohio State, where he made a three in the corner and turned around and snapped at the Ohio State guy who was clearly talking trash to him. I mean, like, those little things, you kind of need to have an edge, and you need to find it. And Indiana last couple of years hasn't had those dudes, and I think they're starting to get them. You look at the guys coming in.
Swagger.
I think they've got more of an edge and some swagger. Yeah,
you got to play with a little bit of swagger. You're coming into Assembly Hall. We're gonna kick your ass.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you about it. And there's right ways and wrong ways, and there's subtle ways to do it, and then there are ways to make Sports Center highlights. And it might be hard to distinguish those, but we've been around it long enough where guys showboating versus just showing that emotion. Just
raw emotion, yeah.
Yeah, Ray Lewis coming out, he got himself ready to play, whether you like that or not. Mm-hmm. But he was just in his own mind, and that whole thing got him going. You think of some great, Michael Jordan when we watched all that Last Dance stuff. He wasn't the best of teammates sometimes. He wasn't giving out candy to everyone. He was ready to show his emotion and kick some butt. And Kobe did the same thing, but you got to play with an edge. And if you think, we talked about Armaan, if you think too much, if you're worried about this or that, instead of playing with that edge, and it's also got to be good, because Devontae played with an edge. Like, he never missed a shot that he didn't want to shoot, or a pass he didn't want to make, but there is that line you have to manage. So,
yep. All right, guys, I got to have some dinner. I'm having shrimp.
All right.
Thanks for coasting, Coach. You really stepped up last minute, buddy.
Yeah, it's always, you're sitting on the couch watching the news at 8:10, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, can you emergency host? And whoa, okay, better go.
Yeah. No, I actually have to try.
Memory. Yeah. And I do have to go back and edit the second segment. I forgot to hit the audio record, but the YouTube record and everything else went, so I can go get that audio real quick. And
cool. Sounds good.
You wait till you do it. There's like 19 different things you got to remember.
I know.
I need to put reminders up here about.
I'm just gonna keep using the PC.
You know
forever.
what? Though you are a genius because you just keep playing dumb. Shh. Yeah, you just keep playing dumb and pass it on. Unlike me, I was just so glad to have a job on here.
I'm doing podcast. I'm doing podcast on my own. All I have to do is but I'm not doing them live and I'm not doing them for radio. I'm just hitting the record button on Zoom and then talking to somebody for an hour. If we had to do that, I'd be good at that.
Yeah. Thanks everyone in the chat mob.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. Later, everybody.
We'll see you.
Bye, Coach.